problems.
Ugh.
All right,
Yeah,
I'm
what a
back
treat.
live now.
It's
Oh,
also where I showed everyone my gross eye.
I missed
That
that.
was
Did you get
fun.
it up close?
Got it real close and personal. Real close and personal.
I had a student yesterday tell me that I have hair. I was like hunched over their computer helping them do something in the editing software. Middle of the time, they're like, "Mr. Ruff, ew, you have hair on your nose." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, "There's a black hair right there in the end of your nose." And then I made the mistake of saying, "Well, pull it out." And she grabbed it and gave it a yank, and I screamed and fell on the floor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they told me that I was a big old and then I'm like, "Did you at least get it?" "Nope, didn't get it, just pulled on it real hard and almost ripped my nose off."
But you did get it eventually.
Oh, I had to come home and get the tweezers, and sure enough, there was one
Yeah,
black hair right there.
that's how it happens.
Oh, I'm getting so
We're
old.
all humans. We're all human
Mhm.
beings.
Man, I had to really eat shit this week. So
Literally? No, don't. That's not appropriate to say here. That's the absolute worst thing I could have said.
nope,
Wipe that
not
from everyone's minds.
no. So back in June, I've gone to the same gym for like 3 years, right here in the town I live in, Buchanan. Old Redbud Fitness. Great gym, loved it. Loved the people there, loved everything about it. Hate they're out on the weekends. They close at like noon or 1 o'clock. It drives me crazy. And I was teaching over in Niles, and I was thinking how my schedule is going to work. So, and then they don't offer a discount for teachers at the school I work at, but the other one does, or the Y does. So this spring or June, I was like, you know what? I'm switching. So I went to, and it's a friend of mine that is like the person that handles this stuff there. And I'm like, Betsy, listen, she might even be listening to this. She listens to the show. Uh,
Hi, Betsy.
so Betsy, I've been avoiding you, and now here you are listening to this.
There's
I said,
never a good way to tell someone something they don't want to hear, but how
"Oh,
about on a podcast that tens to hundreds of thousands of people listen to?
oh, she'll love to hear it."
Okay.
Uh, so I said, I said, "I'm going to cancel my membership, and I'm switching over to the Y." And she's like, "You don't want to do that." And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." I said, "I work over there. I'm going to be going after work instead of before work, and it just makes more sense. And plus, you guys don't give a discount; it's cheaper." She's like, "You're going to hate it over there." And I'm like, I worked out at the Y for 10 years. Like, I know that gym. I don't hate it at all. And she's like, all right, whatever. So I canceled and I went to the Y. And in my mind, the Y was this nice new facility
Uh-huh.
until I remembered it was a nice new facility 20 years ago when I first joined it. It is no
Yeah.
longer nice and new. It is old and ratty and it stinks. And the
He was
showers are
right,
gross and half of them don't work. And
Betsy.
the water fill station, the refrigerator doesn't work on it, and so you just get lukewarm water when you fill up your water bottle. And they have like one of every, like they have two bench presses, and it's much more crowded. So yeah, it's so yesterday I like went after school, went straight to the gym. It was chest day. I go to the bench. There's 15 high school kids standing around the bench. I couldn't get into it, so I decided to go out and go to the machines. And they also did this other fun thing where they took all the cardio equipment and turned it so it's facing the machines. So like I'm sitting on like the pec deck, the fly machine,
Mhm.
like this, and 5 feet away from me is somebody on a treadmill facing me.
No. No, that's so uncomfortable.
And I was just like, this is bullshit.
Oh,
This is bullshit.
no.
I
It's like they do it so you won't stay there or stay on the machines very long.
I don't know, because when I was there before, they used to. There's one side of the building is all glass and it overlooks the river, and that's all the cardio equipment faced that way.
Oh,
And
that's
then for
great.
some reason they turned it all around, so now it's facing inside and it's facing the people that are trying to work out.
I'm telling you, it's a ploy because it got too crowded and they were like, "Oh, we gotta get people in and out of here faster. It's too pleasant that people can look out onto the water. We gotta make them face each other. They'll get out of here in no time."
Pause, Chris. I just want to acknowledge that I get the
I wanna go
reference.
at the gym. I do
Yep.
too, but
And
that's why it's not your fault. It's not your fault that you didn't believe Betsy or that you felt like you needed to move on because we all know the cliche and the episode in question where it's just that you're gonna get bullied into never quitting
that
the
was the
gym.
thing.
So you thought you, like, figured it out.
I wanted to switch gyms starting in January last year. Is when I had the idea, and I could not bring myself to tell the gym that I was quitting the gym, just like Ross. It
Yeah.
yeah.
Want to quit the gym?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like Ross and Chandler couldn't quit the gym. Uh
Yeah.
and so I finally did it. And yesterday I was just so mad because I was in a hurry. And it's just like, I can't get on the equipment I want. I got somebody staring at me while I'm working out. The
Mm-hmm.
water's warm. Fuck this place. I'm done. I'm going back to my gym. And then I went up front and I was like, excuse me, ma'am, how do I quit the gym? Surprisingly, the nice thing about the Y is there's such a big gym. They're like, just fill out this form. I'm like, I
Yeah.
didn't have to do anything. They're like, no, just fill out the
No,
form.
get out. Get out.
Yeah. And so
Once you're gone, we'll turn the equipment back towards in the right direction.
yep. So I filled out the form, I quit, and I drove straight from there all the way to Buchanan to my gym. And then I got there at like 3:55, and I was like, I need to wait 5 minutes because Betsy leaves at 4.
Oh my God.
So I
Oh.
get in there at like 4:05. I literally watched her walk out and then went inside and I re-signed up for the gym.
Let her have this. Let her have this.
Oh, she's getting it right now if
Let
she's
her be right.
listening. If
Yeah.
she yeah. It's I walked and of course I know all of them. I've gone to the gym for 3 years. I know all the people. And they're like, "You're back. Yay," whatever. And I was like, "Yeah, I just can't let Betsy know because
Gonna,
she told."
you're gonna have to start wearing a disguise. You're gonna have to
Yeah.
dye your hair blonde, shave your beard.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, it's
Uh,
like she told me that I was gonna hate the Y, and I did hate the Y, and I can't let her
yeah,
have that win. And so
yeah.
today it was just happenstance. I had to come home first before I went to the gym, and I did that, and I got there again at 4:05, and the girl at the front desk walked in and was like, "I see you waited till Betsy left again." I'm like, "I will never be in here before 4 o'clock ever again. I will not face the ridicule of Betsy telling me."
Oh, let her rip, Betsy. Zach, for those of you who are just joining us, has a family commitment, so he's on assignment.
That's right. This is the Bob and JB show today.
It's a Bob and JV show.
Oh, which we should go ahead and get started because I have to record my ads again.
Yeah, I have to get off promptly as well because my friend had to put her kitty down today, so a couple of people are gonna get together with her and make her feel better so she's not as sad.
Well, that's a nice thing you're doing.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm going to go ahead and end this pregame. And again, pregamers, if you're listening on Wednesday, you should definitely watch the video Friday because there's about 10 minutes of bonus content before I hit record here. Because my soundboard was making me sound like a robot, and Janet thought that was real funny.
It
But that's
was real funny.
on the video and not on the audio, so you can watch that. So make sure you tune in on Friday. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your patronage, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Bye, pre-gamers. Bye, guys. My feet are so cold. I'm sorry I'm so wiggly today, but my feet are freezing.
I
do have
saw
an
you were
electric
wrapped up
blanket.
in a blankie earlier.
Yeah, I'd never turned the heat on in here, and it must be 40 degrees in here. It's very cold.
Oh,
Um,
40? Really? It's
yeah, it's
62
very
degrees
cold.
here.
Yeah, it gets really cold. This little tiny house holds the cold, and it's been getting in the 40s at night. I do have a but we gotta get going. I'll just suffer. I don't need to be
Suffer for
getting the electric blanket out. That's a whole thing.
suffer for
That's a whole
45
thing.
minutes.
I like to use an electric blanket when I'm doing things because it makes my tootsies warm.
And we haven't heard from Viola in a while.
I
Nice to see you
know, it's
back.
great to be back. Now I was my whole body was frozen. I had myself cryogenically frozen, and I'm still thawing out. What year is it?
It's 2012.
I went backwards. I thought I would be unfrozen in the future.
Weirdly, you came back in the past. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
New
Well,
technology. They're
good
always coming up with
year, I
something new.
bet.
Yep. Okay,
I'm
we're
ready
gonna
to
go ahead
hit
and hit record.
record.
I did not. Hopefully these questions are great. I did not have time to read them, so get them on the fly.
Great.
You're recording?
No, I'm about to hit recording. I thought you were gonna tell me when I was supposed to record, but now I'm recording. Now I am recording.
1, 2, 3. All
Nice.
right. And you can do the intro. Were you prepared for that?
Not remotely. Had not given it a thought. Had not given it a thought. Is this episode 20 or episode 19? I guess it
20.
doesn't matter. It is 20. Okay. I thought it was, but then I worried that maybe the that one interview didn't count. Okay. Oh boy. All right. Sorry, Erica, for what's about to happen. Ahoy, friends. You are listening to the Truth and Justice follow-up episode for season 15, episode 20, White's closing argument. Bob gets into the closing argument that Jody's defense attorney decides to attack the state's. Nope. Here, I'm coming back and I'm not starting over. Decides to attack the state's case with and does not finish off strong. We have a lot of questions and a lot of discussion. So let's get into it. We are sans Zach today. He's on assignment with family. We miss him and we'll let him know what happens, you guys. Don't worry. We'll get him caught up.
Yeah. Real quick before we get into our discussion about the episode, we're trying to shake off the cobwebs. We had a week's vacation, so we're trying to catch up to where we were at 2 weeks ago. But one housekeeping thing I'm going to do is people were asking a few weeks ago if they were able to send Jody money for their like commissary and stuff in the prison. They are. Listener Jennifer Hill has been in contact with Jody and figured out how to do that and a way to do it. So I wanted to share that with you guys because Jody got moved facilities and they've been dealing with some issues there. But one thing is they've kind of lost a lot of their normal supplies they have, including some grooming and like shaving equipment and stuff like that. Which, as you guys know, Jody is trans. Jody lives their life as a woman in prison, and they're not able to shave. They're really going through a rough time right now. So I want to throw this out there. I know Jennifer and a few other listeners have already like sent some money to put into Jody's commissary so that they can go to the kiosk and order the things that they need. Plus the holidays are coming up and they can get snacks and things like that. So if you are wanting to send any money to Jody, a couple bucks, there's so many of us. If everybody sends a couple bucks, it will really make a huge difference.
Oh, for sure.
For Jody. But all you got to do is go to connectnetwork.com.tto. And that's where you want to send the money. I haven't gone through that process yet, so I don't know exactly how that's set up to do it. But if you do have questions about that, and if you're on Facebook, on our Facebook fan page, if you reach out to Jennifer Hill, maybe Jennifer can even make a post about it and for people to follow a link and explain how all that's done. I know there's a group of listeners that all communicate regularly with Jody. That they're all setting up where they're all I think they're all like cash apping or Venmoing money to Jennifer so Jennifer can send the money because she's already got an account set up. So she may be willing to do that for you too. But I just wanted to share that because I thought it was really sweet that they were doing it. And I know Jody has told me in emails that it's making a huge difference for them. They were pretty upset about the situation they were dealing with when they got into
it's terrible
into the new facility. It sounds like the new facility is supposed to be better, but they're just dealing with some other some issues that we're working on right now. While they're there. So, but that's one way that you can help make things a little better for Jody if you wanted to do that. And with that being said, and gosh darn it, I just realized that again, I was going to ask you if you read the full closing argument yet until I just realized I didn't publish it yet.
I was going to say, I don't think you published it yet.
Yeah, I apologize for that. It will be out by Friday. It'll be out tonight, actually, but on Tuesday when we're done recording this, I just haven't drug it over to because of the vacation and we'd finished recording the episode, and then I vowed that I was going to stay inside with my family for a whole week and not be in the office. I literally did not come out to my office for 5 days straight, which I never do. But part of that 5 days would have been publishing the document. So we'll get that done. But as far as what you heard, what did you think about the closing arguments, Janet?
Well, to be honest with you, at first I was actually, it sounds crazy to say this, but I just didn't know what to expect. I was expecting even less. Now, that doesn't mean that it was enough or that it didn't hurt more than helped, but there were a few points in there that, just in terms of us having spoken numerous times about how kind of ineffective White was, I was almost surprised I was a little surprised to hear some of the things put together. And then in my mind, I thought to myself, like, oh my God, is this just like Jody, like, trying to like, why don't you take a look at these bullet points that I've just written down here because you seem not to know what's going on. And then he just like expounded on those and then ended up doing more harm than good. I don't know. But, there was sort of like, I was like, oh, he's kind of fighting for his client. But at the end of the day, I agree with you that the second you start leaning into the idea that you're going to say like, sure, they did the robbery, but that doesn't mean they did wow, really? That's the route you're gonna take? And I saw someone post on, it's not in the follow-up questions, but I did see someone's post on Facebook when I went in, to check on the follow-up questions that said, was White like a shill for the state? And I didn't necessarily get that feeling. I just got the feeling of, like, ineptitude, like, "Oh, you don't see like, you don't understand how to approach this at all." But I didn't feel necessarily that they were trying to throw it, if that makes sense. Like, I
Oh, I
think
don't
they
think that
thought
at
they were
all.
doing their best, you know?
Yeah, and I saw questions and comments like that from people that thought that White was playing for the prosecution. I didn't get that impression. It just seemed like complete ineptitude to me. Like just did a
Yeah.
really bad job, and some of that strategy stuff. And like I said, I always say this. I sit here and talk like a lawyer all the time, even though I'm not a lawyer. So I'm sure there's lawyers like shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about, Bob. But just for me, like I try to look at myself as like a potential juror. Like, are you convincing me? I already believe
Yeah.
Jody's innocent. And when I was reading through the closing argument, I'm like you didn't help at all. Like you made it,
Yeah.
like it's kind of like putting your eggs in one basket. Like when they throw this whole thing, like it had to be Carvale that did the robbery. Uh, it was like it almost like it made it so that if the jury didn't buy that,
Right.
if the jury buys into the fact that Jody did do the robbery, then he
Right.
left it wide open for, well, then Jody did the murder. Where
Exactly.
like I would have attacked it so differently, where I would have really leaned in, and he also didn't front run anything, and that was crazy to me, and maybe that's just my debate style, but like you try to anticipate what the other person's going to say,
Right.
especially when they're going to get the last word, like it was in this case. So
Right.
you got to know what Cotter's going to come up and say after that, and he just like made no effort to front run anything, like. Mr. Cotter's going to come up here and he's going to tell you that it's all about the robbery
Right.
but don't buy it because, you know what I mean? Like there was none of
Yeah.
that. It was
Yeah.
just so laid back. And then the final closing was like, what, like we believe he's not guilty. And that's the end of it. Like
Yeah.
it was such stark contrast to what
Yeah,
Cotter did, which
for
was just
sure.
authoritative and just dominating and just Jody is guilty. That person that's sitting there is the guilty one. We know, like it was just everything was there was no question left in anything. So if I'm a juror and I'm taking all that in, I'm like, well, that side is 100% certain that they got the right guy.
Right.
And then this side is like, yeah, I mean, I don't think you did it. I don't know.
I know.
It just was so, it was so, which is why I'm doing my own closing argument because
I know, I was gonna say, if only we could find out what you would have said.
it's gonna be long. It's gonna be long. I've been
Good.
writing it, and I'm already as of today. I was at like 8,000 words already on my
Oh, okay.
closing. I don't know what that is for a normal closing, but it'll probably be 45 minutes, an hour of me yammering. Uh,
Okay.
and part of it is I try to lay out at the beginning. I had to like set some weird ground rules for myself, right? So I didn't want to do the closing with. We should get into these, but I guess we can talk about this. It's fine. Um, and I think somebody might have even asked about this in the questions. Is there a question
Mm,
about the rules I made for myself, the ground rules? Maybe
hang
not.
on.
Might have been another post.
I think it's another post.
Okay, so the tricky part was I didn't want to do a closing argument based on new information we've learned now. For example, like we have Sonia Lucas's recantation, we have the time
Right.
card, stuff they didn't have at trial.
Well, that makes sense. That
So
rule makes a lot of sense.
yeah, so there's that rule I kind of made for myself, like stuff that was discovered years later, it wasn't available to White at trial, I'm not using. But the other side of it was I'm super frustrated with his lack of cross-examination of people. And so I allowed myself to say, okay, I'm going to, for example, McKinney's testifying. Like I'm approaching it as though I was a decent defense attorney and that I confronted him with his previous report. Or when Victoria Miles was testifying, I'm approaching it as though if I was the defense attorney, that during cross, I didn't say, "Are you sure there was no plastic on the windows?" And she said, "Nope."
Right.
Whereas I would have said, "Well, here's your initial statement, and here
Yeah.
you said there was plastic on." So I'm approaching it. So I'm adding more into it that wasn't in the trial, but everything that I'm working off of was all the stuff that was in discovery that White had access to that I feel he
Great.
should have brought out in cross-examination. So I'm doing
Right.
more than just the evidence was brought out in trial and kind of assuming some of that, but then kind of drawing the line of, but new stuff that we found afterwards is I'm not saying anything about the time card. I'm not saying anything about Sonia Lucas recanting her testimony because I wanted to
Got it.
see if I could put together a valid argument that would convince an open-minded person that they should acquit based on the available information at the time. So I'm looking forward to everybody hearing it. I'm looking forward to all of our lawyers critiquing my fireman attempt at being a lawyer.
Well, I'm not too worried about it because I do feel like there are many episodes of this podcast in which you are essentially you are making a type of closing statement. Um, every time you're attacking something that was part of the investigation or part of the trial itself. So I'm not too worried about it. But
I did do
yeah, I mean,
a little bit of theatrics though, where
oh no, please tell me.
well, no, not too much but I keep trying to put myself in the position like I'm a lawyer standing in the courtroom in front of the jury.
Yeah.
So I'm speaking as though I'm coming from that place. So I'm saying things like, Mr. Cotter over here told you this.
Great.
And,
Great.
I'm
Wouldn't have it any
saying,
other way.
and I'm saying, look at this jacket. Look at it. Is this gray and black? Like stuff like that. As though, yeah. So I'm trying to do it.
Something with the jacket. Why try to do something with the jacket?
Yeah. But yeah, so I don't know. It's a weird thing. I've never done anything like this before. It's been kind of fun to do it, and it's been a good recap of the case. But yeah,
What if you just went completely over the top and you're like you, madam, sitting there in the second row, batting your eyelashes and fanning your face. I know it's a little hot in here. Your Honor, I do declare, if we could just turn. Guys, I'm sorry. I'm not making fun of the case. You know exactly what I'm making fun of. No, I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, I mean, I think again, I think there are a lot of very empathetic people who are interested in the kind of work that you're doing and listening to this podcast. And so I'm sure I'm not the only one who, in these kind of key moments in someone's life and in someone's future, imagine being in Jodi's position, just sitting there as this is what's happening. And it's the sort of culmination of everything else that's happened in the trial and just feeling so out of control of everything and just how much despair you could feel at, this is it. This is what he's leaving everyone with. This is my last chance.
Yeah.
And that's what they got.
Yeah. And I do want to answer Jeff's question in the chat, who want to know were the DNA results confirmed after the trial?
Good question.
Yeah. So you will not be hearing in my closing argument that the DNA was a match to Andrew Wayne Bell, because we didn't know that at the time of trial. So
that's such a good question. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I addressed the DNA, but it's things like that where look, this is the first time I've ever read through a closing. Certainly there's times I'm like, I might have played that a little differently, or I would have leaned into this, but I've never read where I'm like, you just shit this is terrible. This is the worst. This was the worst strategy ever, the way I see it anyway.
Yeah.
Enough to compel me to say, well, I want to just say how I would say it. But so like the DNA, I address it. And I think I've addressed it in a pretty good way. I think I'm a fabulous lawyer.
Well, you're really teeing it up for next week.
I'm excited about it. I'm excited about that just because it's something, I don't know. It's something very new. I've never done anything like this before. So
are you going to start? Is there going to be a gavel sound at the beginning or anything? Any sound effects?
Well, now that you mention it, as long as we're yapping, I guess there's one more housekeeping thing that I just want to mention. It just made me think of it as we're kind of moving forward. We're kind of approaching the end of the case and stuff and thinking about where things are going in the future. One thing that is going to be happening is right around Christmas time. I hope you guys, it won't be on this feed. It's going to be on a different feed. I hope that you guys will all check out the first 3 episodes of my students' investigative podcast series.
Yes.
So I've got them right now. We've done the investigation part for these first 2 months. And now for the next 6 weeks, it's the journalism part where they're turning that into a story. So all 5 groups are assigned to create the first half of their 6-episode series. So they're all putting together so there's going to be, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like on the feed, because it's going to be one feed, but there'll be episodes 1, 2, and 3 of 5 different podcasts that are all put together 100% by students. So I'm so
I
excited
am
for you guys all to listen to them.
so excited about this. I am so excited about this.
Yeah,
I can't wait.
and shout out to Audio Boom. They're hooking us up, and
Nice.
they're setting us up a feed to do it. So one thing the students are really excited about too is they're going to put ads into the episodes, like ad markers, and we've worked out with the finance guy at school. All the revenue generated from that podcast is going to go back into the broadcasting program for buying equipment and stuff like that. So like the kids are actually going to be earning money for the program. So I thought that was really, really cool.
Awesome. I think that's so terrific. It's always great to hear about young people, that you're in a position where you're helping young people think critically and, ask those questions and look at the world through that lens. I think that's very encouraging. It makes me feel like good about the future,
Me too. And I'm excited for people to hear their perspectives too. Like it's really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And with that being said, that's probably enough yapping out of me. So I know we have
Wait, one last thing. Do you know what that feed is gonna be called? Please tell me it's gonna be called Juice and Thustus.
I don't
Or
actually.
Justice and Truth.
Emily from Audio Boom asked me today. She's like, "What do you want to name the feed?" And I was like, "We probably better figure that out because it's
Okay.
it is a government agency, so I have to. There's probably 25
Ah,
people I have to approve it through.
I'm sure that's true.
I'm sure it'll be something pretty basic to the school. I'm guessing. I don't know. I'll let you know. It'll be clever.
Great.
It'll be clever. I got
Great.
some
It'll
clever
be clever.
kids.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it. Well, let's get into some questions and comments. First, I'm going to just share what Vivian posted. Vivian says, I just want to acknowledge that whenever I hear someone's story has changed, I think about the time I was pulled over for speeding. And when giving the officer information about my vehicle, I told him it was a 2005 when it was really a 2011. I didn't realize my mistake until later when looking at the ticket. So I have a bit of empathy for people who may remember things later or add to an original statement once they've had time to think about it. However, the changing stories in this case are on another level. So obvious. Please remind me if Mr. White is alive and willing to talk about the case. And thanks for all you do.
Mr. White is not alive anymore. That's what they said. But I was reading the chat while you were talking. That's what they asked, right? Was Mr. White alive?
Mhm.
Yeah, not alive anymore. Yeah, that's the thing is there people have like we've had discussions, on the fan page and other social media where people have been, we should be giving people a break. It was a long time went by and stuff. Like I'm always if you pay attention when I'm examining these statements and when I'm comparing, new to statements to previous statements, I don't. There's never like this blanket, like, oh, you said something different, you're a liar. You expect some changes. Memories are malleable. There's all these different reasons. There's certain specific things that I'm looking for that tell me. For example, let's talk about all the Miles family saying that Mario was there with them and received this so-called threat from Shaddis Wells. Okay, that's not a mistake. It's not like they added to something or there's a subtle change. We had very clear statements from them all. We have Glenda Miles saying, I was told to pass this message on to Mario. That is very clearly he is not there. That's not
Yes.
just something first she got. When she walked through the narrative of what happened, I was told by this person to pass this message on to Mario. And then when you have, Andrew or Andre Williams saying that I later told Mario about this information that I heard from this guy. So when you have all these statements like that, and then they come out and say, yeah, Mario was sitting right there and the guy made the threat to Mario. That's when
Right.
I don't have empathy for changes. That's not a mistake. It was a coordinated effort. They all changed their story in the same way. Or that's why I harped on with like Victoria Miles with like the plastic on the windows.
Sure.
It wasn't like she just didn't mention it or she was asked and she said, I think so. She said that the reason she couldn't see clearly was because of the plastic on her windows. That tells me there absolutely was plastic on the windows right then.
100%.
To
Yeah.
then later come back and say, nah, there was never any plastic on the windows. Like
Yeah.
that's not a mistake. That's not a malleable memory. That's a lie.
Yeah. Yeah, that one is that really has stuck with me. I mean, of all the things about this case, that has successfully stuck with me as being the most confounding and frustrating that it just sort of got to sit out there. It makes me a little bit crazy. It makes me a little bit crazy.
There's a bunch of, and that's some of the stuff where where White as an attorney just drives me absolutely crazy as I read through this, because we have the same case file he had,
Right.
and then it's like
But we
when
don't have, we're not working on maybe 20 other cases or however many other he was burdened with. We don't know, in that sense, perhaps.
right, but I don't give a shit. Like when you're
Yeah, I know.
this person's on trial for their life,
I know. I know.
and for you not to be able to cross examine somebody because you missed the fact that like it wasn't Victoria Miles is going to come testify. I don't know. Maybe go read her statements first.
Of course. No, I know. I know.
Anyway, we can move on.
Okay. Liz says, I agree with the idea that it's an exaggeration to say it's impossible for Demario to have learned the name JoJo to utter with his dying breath. However, it made me wonder about a discussion from several weeks back about the injuries he sustained to his lungs. Would it have been possible to have an expert explain whether or not it would have been impossible for him to have said anything at all, much less JoJo by name?
Uh, we would have to have the autopsy, which I'm working on right now, because all we have is 20 pages of testimony, half of which is the CV from Dr. Tam. We, of course, don't have the actual autopsy in the case file, so I'm trying to get a hold of that right now.
But do you think that White had the autopsy, and do you think that White could have,
I don't
gone
think
down
so.
that road?
I don't think so. It wasn't in the prosecutor's file, and that's what he
Right.
got for discovery. Wasn't in the murder book. Wasn't in the prosecutor's file. So I don't think that it existed. I
I
think
mean,
there's a
that's the kind of thing where I feel like, why does a case get to go forward if you're missing crucial pieces of evidence? Why doesn't
like a dispatch log,
exactly.
right?
Like, how does that even proceed? I
Like an
guess it just
EMS
proceeds
report.
because I don't yeah.
What do all
While we're
those
at
things
it,
have in
yes, as a
What do
matter
all
of
those
fact.
things have in common? They would
They're
all
official.
have the time that
Yeah,
EMS was dispatched to the scene,
yeah.
and they're all missing.
Right.
hmm
Yeah.
but as far as yeah, if we were able to get a hold of the autopsy, we should be able to have an expert look at it. But you can even in Sonia Lucas's trial story, if you read it, she says that she first said she asked Mario if he was okay, and he was trying to say yeah,
Hmm.
but he couldn't because he couldn't breathe. And then after that, she said, "Who did it?" And he said, "JoJo." So I mean, like there's obvious, like
That makes the story even more strange,
yeah,
to be honest, in my
it
opinion.
doesn't make sense. Almost like it didn't happen, right? Which is exactly what she said. It didn't
Right.
happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, to like if you can't speak 1 second, but you can speak later, it's only getting worse. There's so much to that. We can talk about how long has been gone by since Mario was shot, how much blood was in the lungs at that point. But just look at the body position. He's found with his legs still on the stairs and his arms hanging out the door. That tells me he was unable to move and was unconscious or dead at that point. When he hit the ground, when he hit the floor, he was done. So the idea of him picking his head up somehow and talking to Sonia, but not moving or trying to crawl somewhere, or you get his legs off the stairs, or I don't know, instead of saying JoJo, saying call 911. Like none of it makes any sense. None of it makes any sense. And then, listen, I've been thinking a lot about this because I'm doing this closing argument, right? So I got to think of like, how do I approach this piece of evidence without knowing that she's recanted? Well, think about the rest of the story. She hears the shots. She opens the door. She sees her friend bleeding to death and says, "Are you okay?" And he says, "Yeah." Which, what? And
Oh, yeah.
then she says, "Who did it?" And he says, "JoJo." And she said, "Cool." And closed the door and didn't call 911, didn't talk to anybody, never came outside, didn't try to help him. And
Yeah.
then after taking that huge risk of popping her head out, right after gunshots are being fired right out there, where there's 6 kids inside, she's got the stones to do that, to find out who did it. But then she's too scared to tell the police what he said.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole
Yeah.
lot of reasons not to believe that story.
It's quite a ride. Yeah, it's quite a ride that you go on, when you walk through everything just like that. And that just going back quickly to when I said earlier that I was almost surprised that White had a strategy at all. I guess
Yeah.
that's what I was sort of trying to say. Because, you hear, I believe early on, he is talking about, look, we heard a lot about how these people were very reluctant to come forward, and you have to ask yourself, did they eventually just and he even brings up, I can't remember who it is, but someone who's saying, like, maybe they just told the police what they wanted to hear. Like, I think that's the point at which I thought,
Well, that was
"Oh, okay,
Sonia.
well, we've said that." Yeah, so it was Sonia. Like, we've certainly said that, and so that's, I think, where I had that flicker of hope, but
Yeah.
then it ended up being couched in this way that I also could just imagine sitting in my chair as the prosecutor being like, "Oh, well, I could just get up and say people were afraid for their lives because they were afraid of what could happen if they came forward, so I don't really have to worry too much." You know what I mean? Like, so many things that he said that may have thought to himself like, "Aha, this really cuts in my direction," is like, no, this is right down the middle, if not leaning harder towards being able to rebut it and make it work better for the state, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, and he did, he did a pretty good job of going after Sonia, but it was the other elements where he shit the bed on it. I hate to do this, but I got to step out for just
Okay,
90 didn't forgot to take my break earlier. Zach said
great.
I'm off. Sorry, Eric, I'll be right back.
Okay, great. Cool. I will continue to talk to everyone. Jeff, I agree with you. It would be interesting to get into some dying declaration research. Like, how often, and I genuinely don't know, but how often are dying declarations made? How often are they proven correct? I mean, that's a fascinating, like, idea of a thing to study, Um, because I'm realizing as you're typing that in the chat that I have absolutely no idea what the sort of, like, stats are on dying declarations. I don't know. It's something that we hear about a lot in fiction, and potentially fiction wrapped up in actual real life. Um, but how often is it like, this is a thing that happened. This person was able to communicate that this person did it, and it turned out that there was other evidence that showed this person did do it, and thank God for that dying declaration. I'm very curious about this. Um,
Okay, we're back. I ended with by saying that he shit the bed on everything else.
yes, you
Now
did.
go.
Yes, you did. Okay, let's move on to Courtney, who says, before launching the case, did you anticipate that the timesheet's validity would be such a big point of contention?
No, and it's only it's only a point of contention with internet people, and I don't mean that disparagingly, but like there are other people that are going to be what makes a difference in the case as far as whether Jody is freed or not, and nobody nobody has ever questioned the validity of it. So, no, I mean, was I surprised that people that think Jody's guilty are trying to attack the validity of it? No. Um, I did, but no, I didn't think that it seemed pretty cut and dry. It seems pretty cut and dry for everybody that, and please don't take offense to this on either side, but for the people that matter, no one's questioning the validity of it at all. And particularly, it's kind of shocking to me.
When you're saying, you're not saying for the people that matter, like the listeners that matter. You're saying for the
No,
people that matter who can make a difference in the future of this case and this
yes,
person's life. I
that's what I
understand.
mean by that. Yeah,
Thanks for clarifying. Yeah.
yeah. But it is surprising to me because the big thing I kept hearing was, "Well, wait till we hear the testimonies from the coworkers and this and that, and then we'll see." And I genuinely hoped that some of those people would be objective in the fact that, okay, now you've heard it. Princella testified the same thing she told the police. I know it was 11 o'clock when I was there, and I know there was still a bunch of work to be done. I could see all the dishes to be done. And then both Cornelius and LaShawn saying we left around midnight. And then you have this timesheet that's clocked out at 12:05. Like, what are we doing here at this point? It'd be one thing if they were like, yeah,
Mhm.
I think we left at 9, and maybe it was like 10 or 11 when we left. And then you had a timesheet that said midnight. That's worth questioning. But when they're both saying it was around midnight, and then the timesheet shows it was midnight, like I'm sorry, I can't waste too much more breath arguing about that at that point.
Can you just remind me really quickly? Because I know that when we were talking about this one episode, you had mentioned like if you believe that Jody did this, there is a way to believe that and take the timesheet to be fact. But it can't also be that the timing of the murder happened so much later than all of this evidence to the contrary,
Yeah,
or the missing evidence to the contrary would seem to provide either. So we're just talking about a small window of time, right? So if you believe that the murder happened when, for all intents and purposes, like, it really seems like it did, and not the time that, certain people are saying it did, certain police officers, um, rather, but, like, so in other words, can you just refresh us on that? Because you did say, like, I respect the opinion if someone who feels that the timesheets are fine and accurate and they're not doctored, but also still believes that Jody's guilty.
yeah. So it was a listener. I think it was Chris. I can't remember his last name, but Chris was a listener who I just thought it was an intellectually honest argument, one that I disagree with, but it comes from, I think it comes from a place of logic and not a place of like starting with a conclusion and working backwards. And
Mhm.
basically what he said was, I don't see how we can argue the timesheet. I won't put words in his mouth, but essentially he's not arguing that the timesheet's not accurate. He's saying that, yeah, Jody probably left work at 12:05, but I still think Jody committed the murder because I think the murder happened at 12:40, and I think and because he doesn't believe necessarily Sherelle's version, because there's conflicts with Sherelle with Nadia Butler and all that stuff there. So he's making the argument that if the murder happened at 12:40, then yeah, like Jody could have got home. Maybe when Cornelia said they talked for 20 minutes, what if it was 15? And then what if Jody didn't go inside, but then just went straight to their car and then drove out there and found them? Like, it's still really tight, but that timeline could work. Like, to me, at least that's an intellectually honest position to have. It's not like, because the other argument, what it feels like to me is, well, I believe Jody's guilty, and therefore I can't believe that Jody left at 12:05, and therefore I don't believe Sean, I don't believe Cornelius, I don't believe Princella, I don't believe the timesheet, I don't believe any of that stuff, because all of that stuff makes my theory blow up. So I can't believe any of that, as
Right.
opposed to, I think it's still possible. And then I would hope that if we're able to find proof that the murder happened before midnight, that people like Chris would look at that and say, well, my position has been Jody didn't leave work for midnight till midnight. So now I see that the murder happened at 11:45. That means Jody's innocent. Simple as that.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would hope that would be the case if we were able to find that.
Gotcha. Boy, I hope we can find that stuff. I really, really hope we can find that stuff. Jeff, let's just read Jeff's comment really quickly. We don't have a ton of questions left in the follow-up, so I'll just read this. But Jeff says, not to beat a dead horse, but I'm so hung up on Nadia's testimony. It would be real easy for her to lie and back her friend and Jody's story, but she basically craps all over their narrative. Can't seem to get past how or why that happens.
Yeah, and I don't know what to do with Nadia's testimony either. I mean, Jody and Sherelle's testimony seem to line up just fine. Nadia's version of, whether it's her memory or she's telling the truth, and Sherelle's lying, I don't know. So if that's what the alibi hung on, if the alibi hung on whether or not Jody went inside, had an argument with Sherelle, got naked, lay down in bed, and then she left, then for me there would be at least some question there. I mean, reading, of course we didn't hear it, but I can read her exact words when she's on the stand, and she
Mm.
seems there's a lot of veracity there when she says, when she's very stubbornly says that her mother and children, her handicap, remember, she's saying, my mother and kids were there all night. Jody never left. And they're like, well, you never told them that. I'm like, I did tell them that. I told them that she was there. And they're like, well, we don't know if she was really there. She's like, she's handicapped and she can't leave. She was there. That read to me is having a lot of veracity behind it. But I would have to look at the conflicts in the timing of how everything worked out when Nadia testified. It does seem like when we read Nadia's original police report, or her second police interview, that she was conflating and confusing the day of the robbery and the day of the murder, because they were
Mm.
really questioning her about the robbery at first, and then she lays out this timeline, and then they clarify they're talking about the murder, so there was some confusion there between the two nights.
Hmm.
But the thing for me is, as far as I'm concerned, as far as the evidence that we have, even if the murder was at 12, even if the 911, it was never that the murder was 12:40, it was that the 911 call was at 12:40. Even if the 911 call was at 12:40, I think Cornelius is enough. I think Jody's alibi ends with Cornelius, because if they clock out at 12:05, we've been through this a million times, but clock out 12:05, take a 7-minute drive back to the house. They talk for 20 minutes and then they get out. Now, Jody doesn't have enough time then to, first of all, Jody doesn't know where Mario is. And even if they drove straight there to 784 Broadway, and again, like I said a couple weeks ago, if you believe Jody did it, the only reason you can believe that is because of Victoria Miles' testimony. So you got to take her version of events, that the car drives around back, gets up, walks up, talks for 5 minutes. They have a pleasant conversation that turns into an argument, and then the gunshots fire. There's just not enough time for me. Like it doesn't matter what happened after Cornelius left, based on the timeline, the way I see it, that really doesn't matter if we believe Sherelle or don't believe Sherelle. And also it kind of speaks to the fact that Jody genuinely didn't know when the murder happened. Jody didn't know. People lie about stuff and alibis. Even, I'm not saying it is a lie, but if it was, about alibis and stuff like that all the time, who are innocent because they see what's happening and they're like, I'm trying to account for as much time as I can. And so I'm trying to give myself more time because, as Jody said at trial, he thought the murder happened in the middle of the night. They didn't know that the murder happened at, in my opinion, probably closer to 11:45, 11:50.
Right. Susan says, do we know when Nadia first told her version of the night? Was it right away?
Right away. It was the next day.
Okay.
Yeah. And the reports on the website, but
I can't hear you. I think my earbuds just decided to stop working. Luckily,
can you hear me now?
Be able to put this on. Hang on.
Can you hear me now?
1 second, everybody. Sorry, Erica. I'm so sorry. So sorry. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, Erica, I'm going to retake this back to the beginning of that line, or me answering Janet's question. It was the very next day. So it was right away. It was the very next day she was, but it's on the website. But if you read through those interviews, you see that there is some like they're really talking a lot about the robbery, and there's a lot of like her alibi that they were talking about with her originally was Jody's alibi for the night of the robbery. And then they slide into the murder, and there's some confusion there. But yeah, her version was right away. Her and Sherelle both talked to the police on that next day, on that Friday.
God, that's so interesting. And we don't know anything about Nadia to know like whether she would like think she was helping Jody or want to implicate Jody for some personal reason of her own. Like, we just don't know anything about any of that.
No, we don't. And I mean, I think a theory is, again, we don't have her recorded statement or a transcript. We have just the police report. So, I think there's a version of this theory where, or there is a theory where she gives this interview and the officer that interviewed her documented it in a certain way. And then a year goes by and trial comes up and the state pulls her in to prep for trial. And they show her, again, just a theory, but it's possible she doesn't really remember all the details. So they give her this report to look at to refresh her memory. And then she reads that and thinks that must be what happened. And that's what she just regurgitates, because her testimony is like, is lock and step with that police report.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what to do with it either. Okay. Just kind of refreshing on what we were talking about earlier. Jeff Corey has a really interesting point, just kind of draws a circle around this idea, as you say in the episode, of White making it so much about the robbery versus the murder. Jeff Corey points out this isn't just the state's motive. Jody literally mentions in their testimony that whoever did the robbery did the murder. This was a time when they were denying their part in it, obviously. So you've heard your own client make a statement tying those two things together, and then you still make your closing argument about how you can't tie those things together. That seems dangerous.
It is dangerous, but like your client saying that is not a police officer. It's not, like you can't take that as gospel that, well, because that would be like saying, Well, if Jody said whoever committed the robbery didn't commit the murder, that must be true.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's what Jeff Corey's saying. I don't think anyone's saying like, look, this means that Jody did do them both or anything like that. I'm just saying if you are that person's defense attorney and the prosecution gets to rebut and they can stand up and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, but I'm not the only one who says whoever did the," you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, didn't Joe say yada yada yada? Like, there's just that one more thing that you could just put the nail in the coffin. Like, oh, thanks for bringing that up. That actually gives
Right.
me the opportunity to remind you that your own client said that whoever did the robbery did the murder, and we've proven that they did the robbery. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It certainly complicates things.
Like, I just would, if you're doing your job as a defense attorney, maybe you take that into account and you don't hang everything on this strategy that you have that is going to blow up in your face
Yeah. See, I
over and
think,
over.
yeah, I think a simple strategy would have been to hammer on the fact that what really matters here is what is the evidence that Jody committed this murder. Period. And I think I would push onto the fact, I would really lean into the fact that the prosecution has like backed into, and even a lot of our listeners have backed into the idea that the robbery was the motive for the murder. But it's backed into because it was established. The police decided that night. According to Andre Williams and Sherelle that was on the scene and Nadia, everybody at the scene that night was saying Jody did it. So they started with the conclusion that Jody did it, and then it became, why did Jody do it? Must be because of the robbery. So the investigation went backwards to get that way. And so now we're like stuck with this like foregone conclusion that, well, the robbery has to be the motive for the murder. But the only reason that anybody thinks the robbery is the motive for the murder is because they already thought Jody did it and they thought Jody did the robbery. Instead of backing up like we did when we really looked at victimology, like what do we know? We know that Mario was a friendly guy that liked people, that was riding around and hanging out with Canvas and hanging out with people all night. We know that Mario dealt drugs, and we know that Mario dropped Canvas off and told her that he had something to do. That's what she said. He dropped her off and said, "I'll be back. I have something I have to go do." And then he went and just parked in this empty lot by himself this whole time.
Objection.
Yes.
Are you giving away too much of next week's episode?
No. Maybe.
Overruled.
Possibly. No, but like I know that and the reason is because, like I said, I don't think the closing argument should be focused on the robbery at all. It should be focused on the fact that what is the evidence of the murder? The jury's job is to determine, was there evidence Jody committed the murder? Jody could be an axe murderer, serial killer. It doesn't mean that you have evidence that Jody committed this murder. And that's what Jody is on trial for, is this murder. So I think I think that was the big mistake in the strategy. All this stuff about what Jody said and all the connections between the robbery and the murder. I think the only thing that should have been addressed there is Jody's not on trial for robbery.
Right.
Jody's on trial for murder. And let's look at the evidence for the murder, and there is none.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question to ask, because if White felt like, you could either say that White was sort of sucked into the narrative that the state was presenting, and then he just kind of kept feeding back into it in a way that was very bad for Jody, or perhaps he, in his mind, was like, well, even though this isn't really about the robbery, obviously I have to talk a lot about the robbery because we've been talking a lot about the robbery. So I got to keep that going. You know what I mean?
I
Like,
think that White was so unprepared and out-lawyered. I think that Cotter convinced him that the robbery was connected.
right.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
because he didn't know he clearly didn't know the case file. I mean,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, he went in. They're playing the dispatch tape, and he never bothered. And he had that in discovery, and he didn't bother to listen to it before the trial. He stops and goes, "I don't know what else is on this tape.
Yeah.
We can't keep playing this. I don't know what else I'm going to hear."
Yeah.
So I think he was so unprepared. He didn't fully understand the case. I think he probably thought maybe this would be a plea deal like most of the other cases are. And then he looked at, I mean, Cotter was a hell of a lawyer. He lawyered the shit out of this case
Yeah.
from start to finish. And I think
Yeah.
that White literally went into the closing arguments thinking it's like, well, obviously that the robbery and the murder are connected because this fellow over here just told me it was 100 times throughout this trial.
Right. Yeah. Well, it worked. Good job, Cotter, I guess. That's all I have. That's all we have.
Okay. Well,
That's true. Yeah.
on Sunday, you get to hear how I would have responded to Art Cotter's closing argument. And instead of just me talking about what I should have, could have, would have done, I'm going to do it and see if I convince any of you that Jody Hill is actually innocent. So make sure you tune in on Sunday for that. And we'll talk to you guys again next week.
Objection. Attorney is giving testimony. I'm just trying
Overruled.
some stuff out. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
All right. Hit stop on our audio. I'm so tired. I'm so mad that I had to record those ads again.
I'm so sorry. I've so been there.
Gu-
I have been there.
Guys, so the issue was when we started the pregame, I sounded like a robot, and
Worse.
then realized after that the ads that I'd recorded right beforehand also sounded like a robot. So once I fix the soundboard, now I got to go back and it's a whole. Listen, you guys don't care about this, but there's a whole process of exporting the files from this that I have to sit here for 20 minutes and wait for everything to export before I can.
Yeah.
It's a tough
I'm
life.
sorry.
It's a tough life, but I'll
How
get
long
through
is it going to take you?
15 minutes. Well, it'll take me 15 minutes to record everything, and then it'll take
Then
me
you
another
got
15 minutes to wait for it, and then
I gotcha.
I'll move it. And that's because when Erica comes in, we have a system about where the files are at when she comes in on Wednesdays, and
Right.
that system doesn't include her having to extract the ads, and I'm not even going to go through that with
Okay.
her.
That's just taking you further away from actually doing it instead of closer to. So
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and end this thing. Thanks everybody for tuning in. It was great to chat with all of you guys, and we'll talk to you guys next week. And by the way, somebody asked in here about Delphi. If you want to hear Delphi, you got to get on the Patreon because we spent, I don't know, 40 minutes
we've spent
breaking it down in
basically
the
the last
pregame.
3 follow-ups at least talking about that almost
Yeah.
nonstop.
Yeah. And today we really got into the weeds about where things go from here with the appeals and stuff like that. So all that's going to be on the pregame for patrons. So you always jump on there if you want to hear that. But as for now, we're signing off. We'll talk to you guys next week.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Why are we whispering?
I don't know.